And this is not something we've seen at all this season. This is Isaac Parks lined up to punt for Ohio Valley. Can they pin him deep?
Yes, you heard that right. We have not punted, not a single time at this point in the season. That is me out there. I'm Isaac Parks. I'm the guy that's about to go out and punt the ball and take his first ever career NFL punt, and take his first ever career pro punt. So what I want to do is add a little context, go back and break this down, because I think it'll actually show you guys a lot about sort of the behind the scenes of what a punter's going through, just kind of as they step out on the field. I think it's some really interesting stuff, but there's obviously some backstory here. So who are we? We're the Ohio Valley Ironmen. We are part of the IFA professional football program, which stands for the International Football Association. The problem is launching, we've had some troubles getting some of the other IFA teams up to play us. This means we're playing local semi-pro teams, and for those of you who don't know, I used to play semi-pro, so I kind of already knew what was going to happen, which is why in my last video, I gave everybody a warning that we might not get a lot of punts.
Unfortunately, they're probably not going to need me much. I'm asking the quarterbacks, just give me one a game.
And boy howdy was I right. I was actually more right than I thought I was going to be. I was thinking like one a game, and obviously we're game 3, and I just got my first punt. So what is happening is we just have like a little bit more of a talent gap, and we have a lot more of a organizational gap, which means that we're having practices every day and watching film and breaking down opposing teams' film, and if their semi-pros are anything like our semi-pros, that's just not really happening. So as you can imagine, we are blowing the brakes off of teams, okay? So game 1, we start off 45-0, beat them pretty handily. Game 2, we go 39-0, and the big asterisk on both of these games is that we never played a full 60 minutes against either of these teams. The first game, we started the running clock in the second half, and they ended up throwing in the towel by the end of the fourth quarter with about like 3 minutes left. That's when I thought I was gonna get my first punt. Didn't happen. Once we got a pretty big 32-0 lead, they said not just running clocks, but they wanted 7-minute quarters. They wanted this game to be as over as quick as it could be. So that's what happened. So by game 3, we now have a score deficit of 166-0. And as you can imagine, I wasn't really imagining I was gonna punt. That might sound like an excuse, it's really not. I mean, we'll break down what actually happened on the punt later. It was an okay punt. It's a lot better than I think it looks on paper because I'm going for a different style, but we'll get to that. So pretty much, we're starting the second half. The score is 54-0. Every time our offense steps on the field, we skip the part where we start warming up for punt and start warming up for PAT. So at this point, haven't really punted. I got like 10 or so punts in at halftime, and I was actually hitting them really well, but hadn't really had like a good warm-up session since pre-game. We don't really have a kicking down the sideline or working at fixing that, because that's something that I think could help just in the future keep our legs a little bit looser. Leg was a little tight. Once again, it has nothing to do with the punt that's going to happen. I'm just giving some backstory, a little bit of context about what's going on. So we haven't punted up to this point. We're getting ready on an offensive drive, and we're starting with the ball on the plus side of the field. So naturally, we're warming up for PAT when we have a run for a loss, and then a run for a loss, and then a pass over the middle gets broken up. And all of a sudden, it is a punt situation. So when I walk out on the field, the ball's on the plus 47 going in. This is kind of known as sort of a gray zone. Now, what's really interesting is in the NFL meta, there's one type of ball that's expected to be hit, maybe two. Okay, you're either going with the most popular one, which is the Aussie, which is when you take the ball and you hold the nose down like this and hit the bottom to sort of create this backspin on it. Or you're going to, which is slightly less popular, hit a banana, which is when you hold the ball sideways and kick through the side to make it spin sideways and sort of curve. Both of these are really popular, but there's pretty much 2 reasons why I didn't go with either of these. I wanted to go with a third style of punt. Reason number 1. The Aussie is just way too safe. It really is. It is a super, like, you will hit like a 40-yard 4-4, and then you force a fair catch at like the 8-yard line. If everybody was on the same page, it works really well with your gunners, if there's a lot of good communication and everybody knows their assignments. But the second problem is we really haven't had a lot of time to go over close range punts. I think the coaching staff, and myself included, always assumed that if I was gonna punt, it was going to be from backed up, because they would always tell me like, hey man, if we're backed up, and we're in like the late half of the game, we'll probably dial down the play calls and try to get you like a big open field punt, because they really like me, they really want me to get recruited somewhere, and those are the punts that do it. Close range punts, not so much. And since we hadn't gone over it too much, I wasn't really sure how much our gunners knew, what assignments there were. I don't know who's gonna go behind the returner. Is anyone gonna be looking for the ball, or are they all just gonna run the returner? These are things that are kind of going through my head. So instead of taking a risk on people knowing their assignments and being able to sort of push the buck on people if something goes awry, right? Like if I had a good end over end ball that lands at the 7 and bounces forward, I could just be like, oh, well, we didn't know our assignments. I didn't want that. I wanted to hit my ball. Okay, there's a punt that I love to hit. I call it like a dart. It's probably more known as just a coffin corner, but for my specialty, you hit it low and you sort of want to just kind of drive it away from the returner, especially when the returner is not familiar with your game. They're not going to be able to prepare for this, which is why I like it as kind of a surprise punt. So I've done this a lot in my career. Some of the more notable ones, as I did it against Wingate University in college, and it was arguably a worse ball than the one I hit last Saturday, but it took a favorable bounce, and I'll get into why it might do that. The second time I did this, actually did it in Joda Pro, where once again, this one's closer to the sideline and takes a good bounce, and we get the ball back inside the 10, or we don't get the ball back, but they start inside the 10, so it's all good things. So why I like this style of punt, first and foremost, is it puts all the onus on me to make a play, and especially when you're not really sure if people know their assignments, you want to be the one that makes the play, right? Like I could just take this out of the hands of everybody else if I hit this ball super clean and get the bounce that I need. No one else has to touch the ball. It's going to go out of bounds. So that's the one part that really drew me into potentially wanting to do this punt. And the second part is I really just like this style of punt. Like I said, I'd hit it a bunch, and it has a good turnover ball and it has a good miss-hit ball, so it kind of gives me some room to be a little imperfect and get me a higher chance. So with the Aussie punt, right, as it's coming to land, you have a 50% chance of it going forwards or backwards if you hit it really clean, right? Because as it's coming down, anything from here, let's assume the end zone's this way, anything from here to here is going to be like a pretty flat hit and give you a favorable bounce, but anything from here to here is going to just bounce straight forward to the end zone. So what I liked about this, if you turn it over, and you're going to be able to see, I'll put a diagram on screen, from where I'm kicking to where the ball landed, which is a couple yards outside of the numbers at the 5-yard line, that's a pretty steep line, and it gives you a lot of potential bounces that are out of bounds and in your favor if you look at the cone of potential bounces for where the ball can go. So the way that ball spins, it's bouncing towards you, right? You're the pylon, and that's where I was aiming. Okay, the ball's spinning kind of like this. Okay, so it's a hefty spin. It's got a good amount of spin, and I could have kicked it tighter and probably gotten a little bit more of like a slightly higher percentage, but it had a nice little wobble on it of a half turn. So as you can see, if you're the pylon, this little corner right here is going to be some sort of touchback, but then all of this over here is going to be a ball that takes a really good check. So to me, that's looking like a better odds than a 50-50 ball like an Aussie. Now all of a sudden it's looking like a 70-30, 80-20 in my favor. So off my foot, I wasn't mad. I'm sitting over here watching the ball, hoping that it gets that bounce. Now unfortunately, the way that it was coming down, right, in its spin cycle, it hit like this and just shoots straight to the end zone. That's part of the risk. It would have been part of the risk even if it was an Aussie style ball. But like I said, once you look at the angle it left my foot to hitting the ground to where it bounced through, you can see that you probably like the odds of this ball taking a favorable bounce. Unfortunately, it didn't. And that's part of the game. That was the risk I wanted to take. I could have put it maybe a little bit further at a risk of hooking it and it just going straight into the end zone. I liked the placement of it. I didn't hate it. And I think if it turned over, it would have faded to the right and given me a good ball. But just wanted to break that down. I think it's more interesting to break down mishits than like good punts that just do everything you need to do, because it's interesting to see the nuances of the sport and how like tiny little changes could have made a big impact on the play. Like I said, people might criticize the style of punt I hit right there. It's my favorite go-to ball in pooch punt situations. If I had to do it over, I would hit the same thing. Now, this is different if I had more punts on the season and I knew I was going to get a lot more opportunities to potentially punt even in that game. Maybe I hit a slightly safer ball, but hey, I was going for broke, and hey, we went broke. But thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Maybe you learned something about punting. Peace.
Good kick. I think that one's got too much on it. And it bounces into the end zone.